It all started with a promise made to protect a family home. But what happens when that plan goes horribly wrong? When instead of protecting a home, it ends up tearing a family completely apart. Just imagine getting an eviction notice for the home you've lived in your whole life. And when you look at who's forcing you out, it's not a bank, it's your own child. That's the shocking reality a father found himself in, and those are his words. So let's get into it. This is a story of Arthur, a dad who ended up in the most unthinkable situation, locked in a legal battle against his own family for the very house he raised them in. For almost 10 years, Arthur lived his life thinking his home was secure, all thanks to a family agreement. But that belief was absolutely shattered when a legal document showed up at his door. It was an eviction notice, and the owner ordering him out, his daughter, Megan. In a flash, the family home became a family war zone. And this really gets to the heart of the whole mess. You've got two completely different stories. Arthur claims the whole property transfer was just a temporary trick, a secret plan to shield the house from his debts, with a clear verbal promise that he'd get it back. But his kids, Daniel and Megan, they tell a totally different story. They say no, this was a permanent, deadly serious transfer and a last-ditch effort to save the home from their father's own destructive lifestyle. Two opposing realities, with one house caught in the middle. So how on earth did it get to this point? To really understand the legal fight, we have to look at the paper trail, the facts that nobody disputes. So if you follow the documents, a pretty strange pattern pops up. Back in 2014, Arthur sells the house to his son, Daniel. But here's the thing, no money actually changes hands. Then, for years, the house gets passed between the brother and sister like a hot potato. Daniel gives it to Megan, then Megan gives it back to Daniel, then Daniel gives it back to Megan again. And this all leads straight to 2023, when Megan, as the official legal owner, starts the process of kicking her own father out. The court did not focus on emotion. It asked one key legal question. All the family drama, the betrayal, the hurt feelings, the judge had to push all of that aside and focus on a single critical point of law. Everything came down to this one question. Was that first deal back in 2014, the sale from Arthur to his son, a complete fake designed only to deceive people? Or was it a real, legally binding transfer of ownership? The answer would decide who got to keep the house. So when you have two completely opposite stories, how does a court decide who's telling the truth? It all comes down to evidence. And this is where a really important legal concept called the burden of proof comes into play. It wasn't up to the children to prove their story was true. Since Arthur was the one making the huge claim that a formal legal document was a fake, the responsibility, the burden, was entirely on him to prove it. And when the court started asking for that proof, Arthur's case just started to fall apart. He claimed he was drowning in debt at the time, but he couldn't produce a single piece of paper to prove it. The witnesses he called told conflicting stories that didn't add up. The judge also had a pretty big question. If this deal was a sham from day one, why did you wait almost a decade to challenge it? But the real kicker was this. Arthur actually owned another property back then. He could have just sold that to pay any debts, which made his whole hide the house story seem, well, unnecessary. With so many holes in Arthur's story and no real evidence to back it up, the court found the children's explanation to be way more plausible. The idea that they were trying to save the family home from their father's behavior just made more sense. But Arthur wasn't ready to give up. He was convinced the first court got it all wrong, so he took his case to a higher court to appeal the decision. So the case went through the whole process. First, the district court heard all the evidence and ruled that the transfer was, in fact, legally valid. Arthur's case got dismissed. So he appealed. The case then went to a higher court, whose job was to review the first court's reasoning. And after going over everything, the appeals court's conclusion was unanimous. The first judge got it right. That's two separate courts that looked at the same facts and came to the exact same decision. The case was closed. So after all the arguments, all the testimony, and two court rulings, what was the final outcome of this family tragedy? The legal road came to an end. Arthur lost. The eviction was upheld, and the court confirmed that his children, Daniel and Megan, were the rightful legal owners of the home. It was no longer his. This whole painful story really boils down to one stark, tough lesson. A family promise might feel real, it might be built on trust, but in the eyes of the law, a promise you can't prove is often no promise at all. One decision changed everything. Watch the next case right here and subscribe for more real stories.